I thank you, Sue, for picking those bits up. But I'm a freelance midwife, and I purposely use that not independent, because our independent colleagues have different roles to what I do. So if people wonder why it says freelance, it's because my role is very different. So, of course, why did I have to change? I was already doing a lot of face-to-face parent education, general parent education, and, as you can probably guess, water births. But, of course, COVID hit with just like a huge truck coming out of the blue. And overnight, not only did it have a huge impact on other issues like continuity of care and home births and water births and lots of other things, birth centres being closed, but for me, my beautiful venue that I usually use for teaching was literally shut overnight. No warning, that was it. So I had to very quickly find a different way to be able to provide some sort of high quality education. And this is my journey of what I've done and continue to, and like Jerry, probably will continue for some time to come. So this was something that was said to me by several of the mothers who sadly I had to postpone because literally we were shut overnight. And women said they'd already felt very isolated and lonely, and the loss of the antenatal education, which again, Jerry said, you know, we do find women who do make friends for life in antenatal education. And because it was shut down, literally, we just felt that that loneliness and isolation was compounded. So I was very keen to do what I could to try and help that. So I discovered Zoom over 2 years ago, just over 2 now, because I started my first Zoom in March. I'd never even heard of Zoom. I wouldn't have known what it was. My nephew always used to laugh and say, you don't even know what Wi-Fi is, because I used to call it woofy. So goes back to the laughters bit again. So Zoom for me, and please bear in mind that I am freelance, it had to be a media that was cost effective. And many of the other medias like Teams and Blue Button were just too expensive. So it had to be cost effective for me, because then of course it's the cost effectiveness for parents, because they pay for my services. What they get in return for the cost effectiveness from their point of view, and it was something I learned very quickly, was that I send out a copy of the slides with links at least a week before the class is due to start. So they have a chance to look through, they have a chance hopefully to write down their questions. If they are someone who's shy, again, just like Jerry, they know they can email me back and I will have those questions there, but don't have to say Jerry said or Jerry asked. It's much, much easier for those people who are very, very shy. And a lot of people are. Anyone who does classes will know that. Now, because I'm private, I'm a freelance midwife, I have to make sure that everything I do is covered by my professional private insurance. I've spoken to lots of colleagues since all this started, and a lot of midwives did not realise that their professional indemnity, whether it's with the RCM or Unison, would not cover them outside their workplace, which probably for most of us would be the NHS. Now, that was something that I knew because I already had the insurance up and running. So it's just a plea. Please do not assume that your current indemnity would cover you outside, because it won't. Have to say I've never been sued, so I guess that's the positive. And I have to tell you, it's not cheap. So this is not a cheap way of thinking, oh, that's, you know, really good. It had to be easy to use. Now, it had to be easy to use for me, hence the glitches tonight. But of course, it had to be easy and accessible and low cost for the parents who were joining. And all of them have said that Zoom has been a really good, easy access for them. It's a pretty stable media. Some other medias are not so good. Big Blue Button, which is used a lot in America, and so if I'm teaching there, they always want Big Blue Button. I don't find it very stable. And there's nothing more than annoying. And it does happen where the speaker, me, the parents, them, can get thrown out, as in, you know, the system collapses. And I just tell them, don't worry, go and get a coffee, reboot it, and it will come back up. So it's being flexible as well. I do keep it to very small groups, and I make it as interactive as is at all possible on a Zoom platform. But the comments I've had back, and they come back through emails, unlike Jerry, I haven't done a big formal assessment, but the evaluations that come back from the parents have been very positive. The interactive bit, the other side as well, and you can't see me today, which is a bit of a shame, because one of the things is the interaction must be appropriate. Now, I've got my door shut to my office. I've also got the cat shut away. The number of times, which is quite amusing, makes people laugh. My cat loves to come in. He usually sits on the keyboard, which totally messes everything up. So it's simple things like that, you know, making sure parents try and have an environment. I have no problem if children come in and join in. We've certainly had lots of different pets, but it's about just being aware of those interruptions that might interrupt the interactive part of it. Thank you. So here's our problems. Technology stability. It's been pretty good, but of course, you know, all of these platforms, some have developed very, very quickly and some have readapted quickly. Others are still a bit unstable. The issue as well about having access. So I have run the classes at different times and different days of the week. So usually whoever the first couple of people who approach me, I will say to them, what's a good time and day? So I have literally done them mornings, afternoons, evenings, every day of the week. And because of that, sometimes you get more uptake than others, but it's quite surprising how many people seem to like Saturday afternoon. And especially during lockdown, the weekends were very popular. So I did a lot at the weekends. Data protection, really important for me. All of my participants, the parents, will obviously have my email details. I tell them that I only keep their emails until after the session, and then I delete it. And I think that's important for them to know, because remember, I'm doing this privately. If you are going to develop something like this, talk to your trust communications department. Some trusts were really quick and really good at getting their IT up and running and being able to do classes. Sadly, others were not. And that's really sad, because they've often been redirected to other systems that were not as good as they might have been. They weren't homegrown. And of course, advertising. Really careful, obviously, as a freelance midwife, how and where I advertise. I'm not going to go through content because it's fairly standard, but I've just put a few pictures on. The parent slides that are identical to mine, except they don't get any pictures that are not stock photos of something like Google Images. And that's to protect the parents, unless they sent me photos about their birth and with permission, which of course I make sure the parents who are watching know, will be aware of that protection for parents. One of the things that has been a challenge, and Jerry said it as well, is being able to demonstrate things on Zoom. I did try and do some physiology right at the beginning with a normal sized doll and pelvis, and it just didn't work. But I've got a very tiny one that I've had most of my career, and she works beautifully because she's literally only the size of my hand. So again, that's why I like that photo of having your baby at home in your hand. But certainly, yes, trying to show parents things can be quite challenging. So what's been very important during COVID? Well, there's some obvious things. And I think with all of the teaching, we've been trying to share that a lot of what we share about COVID and the things below it is what we can only describe as best advice. Much of the information is not yet evidence-based. And I think parents enjoy the fact that I'm honest with them, whereas normally we're saying this is evidence-based and here's the reference if you want to look at it. but much of the work has not yet been. It's not been around long enough. It's a new virus still. It's only, 3.5 years old. So it's not been around long enough yet. But with the best advice we can give, we do know that skin to skin, of course, is important. Optimal cord clamping, the microbiome does not appear to be affected by COVID, and of course the breastfeeding values anyway. So I do stress that to parents. This is best advice. It's not evidence-based. And then of course we get to the use of the internet. So I put links as well on my slides, depending on what type of session I'm doing. I do always check the films. I check their credibility and the content. Now that might sound obvious, but it is surprise what is out there. So I would never put anything on as a link. And then I warn parents that there are more links that will come from that one that I've sent them, and they need to be very clear of where it's come from. Midwifery and childbirth around the world, believe you me, as I'm sure many of you will know, is very different. I do lots of links to charities, particularly charities that will help perhaps with things like if women have got pelvic girdle pain. That's a really good website. Because this is antenatal, remember, so it's not going to be necessarily the links that they'll want for birth trauma, which we hope things, may improve, sadly, because of the Ockenden report again. And of course, advocacy groups, so things like AIMS and Birthright, which do lead on beautifully to the next slide, please. And there we are. We've had a plethora of books from some of the advocacy groups and individuals in the last 2 years. Now, I suspect a lot of that is because, like many of us, we're working from home. And so those books I do share with parents. None of them are expensive. I do say, I don't expect parents to go out, but they should be able to get access to them. And I have copies of them. And if a parent is very interested, I'm always very happy to share them and send them out. That lovely quote as my sort of almost finished. I found that it's from a Chinese philosopher, and I just thought it was really good. Maybe it should read she rather than he, but he who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened. And a lot of what I teach is about women taking back responsibility, as some of those books will, their own rights over their own bodies, their birth and their babies. And I have to say, Sue kindly said, I've been a midwife a long time. Next slide, please. And it's sad how we have taken away that responsibility from women. And now we're trying to reintroduce it and bring it back for women. And that can be very hard when you've got a long culture of the responsibility and everything coming from us. So that's a real challenge, I think, for a lot of women, particularly women from other cultures. And of course, we are an incredibly mixed demography nowadays, and will continue to be, as sadly things like Ukraine and that carry on. So that's me. You can contact me. Sue knows I love travelling. That was a cruise to Alaska, obviously pre-COVID. And yeah, that's me.